Hello, boys and girls. Today we're going to talk about positive and negative numbers. And just to give you a little bit of history about numbers in general, thousands of years ago, people developed what we call normal positive numbers, and they decided that that didn't really fit all of their needs because sometimes you had part of a number. So then they came up with fractions, and then they realized that that didn't quite meet their needs. Because sometimes we have numbers that are actually less than 0. So that's how negative numbers got invented. So basically a negative number is a number less than 0, okay? So if you take a look at this number line that I've placed here on this piece of paper, I have drawn a dotted line where if we were able to put one of our mirrors from class right here on this line, and look through on this side, we would notice that when I look at the 1 and it passes through that 0 line, it picks up a negative symbol on this side. And the 2 picks up a negative symbol when I cross that 0 line. So what I'm trying to show you is opposite of positive number is a negative number, and vice versa. If I have a negative number, the opposite of a negative number is a positive number. So you can kind of see that if I wanted to find the opposite of 3, it's going to be -3. If I'm over here on this side, the opposite of -5 would be 5. Okay? So that brings us to what are we going to be doing with these negative numbers? Well, before I start with that, I want to cover a couple of terms here. First, we're going to look at the word credit. Which when we talk about a business or a checking account or something like that, when we talk about credit, that means that we're going to add something to our account. So this would be if we were running a business, if we were selling something, it would include sales. If you had a bank account, like a savings account, any interest that you earned from the bank would be a credit. Any other type of income, which means money that comes into the business, would be considered a credit, and we would add that amount. Our second term is the word debit, and when we have a debit, we're going to subtract, and most of you are probably familiar with a debit card. Now, when we talk about business, we talk about cost of materials. So if you're making something to sell, you have to buy those items to make the item that you're going to sell. So that's going to cost you money before you can actually make money. Most likely you would have to pay people that work for you. That would be salaries. And any other expenses that you would incur with your business, you're going to subtract. So basically what I've done is I've set up a little table down here on the bottom part of my paper. And it's similar to a check register. So if you like doing these kinds of things, you might think about that later on when you grow up. You might want to be an accountant or work with money or do something at a bank. But basically in this column right here, I have transactions that are going to take place for our business. We have a column that says start, we have a column that says change, and we have a column that says end/start. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to go through a series of transactions, and we're going to decide what are we going to do with this account. Are we going to add because it's a credit, or are we going to subtract because it's a debit? And how does that change our ending number? So let's take a look at the first transaction. We're going to start our business, and we start at 0. So basically that means that I am starting at, my marker's not going to write, $0. And I'm not making any kind of change here because I haven't gotten any money in and I haven't taken any money out yet. So 0 here, and that means my ending balance is 0 because we're just starting out. We haven't really done anything yet. Now, notice that this says end/start. So this number that I end up with here is going to be my starting number in the next row. So I'm going to take that 0 and I'm going to move it over here. And now my transaction says that I have a sale of $5. Now, if I look back up here, sales is a credit. That means I'm going to add. So I'm going to write the word add, and I'm going to put $5. Okay? So what I'm doing now is I'm taking this $5, I'm adding it to 0, which of course equals $5. So this is my ending amount. It's also going to be my start amount for the next line. So I'm going to put $5 here. And now I have a debit of $3. That means when I look up here, I'm going to subtract that number. So I'm going to write subtract. I'm going to write $3. So basically, my number model will be $5 minus $3 is going to give me $2. And I'm going to take this ending amount and move it to my start. So I'm starting with $2. I have another debit of $2. So again, that means I'm going to subtract $2. So now I have $2 minus $2. Uh-oh. That means we're back at a zero balance. We're not doing so hot, are we? Okay, so we're going to take this ending amount. That's going to become our start. So now we're back to $0. Such is business, right? Let's scoot my paper up here a little bit. All right, now I have a credit of $6. Thank goodness. That means we're going to add $6. Okay, so I have 0 plus $6. That's going to give me $6. Thank goodness we're not in the negative. Uh-oh. Looky here. My $6 is going to come over here. Uh-oh. I have a debit of $8. So that means I'm going to subtract $8. Okay? So if I were going to set that up in an equation, that would be $6 minus $8. Now, if you remember, we've talked in class about how when you have numbers like that, you end up with a negative number. Well, guess what? That's what's going to happen. So if we think back to our number line, if I am at $6 and I subtract 8, I am not going to be on the positive side anymore. So if I'm here, I'm going to move over 8 spots to the left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I land on -2. Okay, so that means if I take $6 and subtract $8, I end up with -$2. Okay. So that, again, is going to be my starting amount, -$2. Let me scoop my paper. And again, I have a debit of $3. So I'm going to subtract $3. So again, if I were going to write a number model, it's going to be -$2 minus $3. So if I look back at my number line, if I'm at -2 and I'm subtracting -3, I'm not going to go towards the positive side. I'm going to go back over this way. So I'm here. I'm going to go over 3 spots to the left. 1, 2, 3. So that makes me end up at -$5. Okay. Now, we bring that -$5 over here as our starting amount. Finally, we have a credit. Ugh, it's only for $5, darn it. So that means we're going to add $5. So I have -5 plus 5. If we come back to the number line, if I'm here at -5 and I add 5, that means I'm going to head toward the positive side, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I land on 0. So we're back at $0. Boy, our business is not doing so hot, is it? Okay, so basically what we've covered today is what is the difference between a credit and a debit. credit, remember we add, debit we subtract. We used a little register here to kind of show what happens when we have positive and negative numbers and how those positive numbers, where our balance column, can end up turning into a negative. We used a number line to help us go back and forth to add and subtract those numbers. Now, some of you may be able to do it without a number line, which is perfectly fine, but if you need to use a number line to get started and get used to using this, no problem. Hopefully that makes sense. I will see you in class.